Hi, my name is Griffin. I'd like to have a casual conversation about my wrestling career, which spanned 25 years. And I started wrestling in London because there was no wrestling in Ireland when I left here in the early 1960s, having been for a short while in the Irish Army, and I've done a little bit of boxing in Clonmel for my recruiting place, and I went on to Collins Barracks in Cork, where I was in the engineers there, and I also done a small bit of boxing there in the army, it was. And I got the old Innes Fanel over in 1960 over to London into Paddington Station. It was an old steam train, went all the way to Paddington Station. And I lived in Ladbroke Grove, which is now the famous Notting Hill Gate area. And I had a brother there, Jim, who got there before me. And I started out with in the car trade with Jim. I washed some cars in the Standard Triumphs. Got to drive a lot of the old TR3s and 4s and things like that, bring them into the showroom, polishing them and bring them out. But I got into plastering then with an old Galway man. I'd done a bit of plastering with him, and around 61 I got into Plastering Limited as an apprentice improver, and I was into number 11 Downing Street, which is very interesting because we did a lot of stucco work and ornamental plastering, and I worked with two old Londoners, and I thought this was fantastic because this was 1961, and there was no trouble between Britain and Ireland at that time, and I just thought to myself, walking down horse cars parade, the horse cars parade, I thought to myself, they mustn't realise that I was born in the same part of Tipperary that Dan Breen was, and I thought to myself, if they only knew it, and I'm going into the Treasury with my pass, and it was fantastic. But at that particular time, I had joined the Foresters amateur wrestling club, and there was also a boxing club upstairs, Middle Road, and I was always very interested in the kind of show business side of wrestling. So I went around to all the fun fairs, and I went to a place called Barnet. This was in the early 1961, and the Barnet Fair was called. And most people now, especially Londoners or people that used to listen to East End, will know Barnet Fair is head of hair. It's the slang word. I haven't got much left now, but I had a decent head of hair back there, as you can see my picture here with the wrestling. But at that stage, there were two guys that the whole world knows about now were boxing in the Barnet Fair. They were the two Cray brothers, the Cray twins were boxing. And so I spent a bit of time in and out of the challenging the guys on stand for boxing, because the wrestlers at that time, the showmen, would have nothing at all to do with some fellas, especially if they thought he was an amateur wrestler. They would avoid him like the plague. Definitely didn't want to wrestle with a good amateur. These were showmen. So anyway, to move on a bit, later then I got with another one in Acton Roundabout, Acton Park, which was Mel Reid was the man on the boots there, the boxing boots. And he had a man on the stand there, they called Black Angel, and he was all dressed up with his black tight, black polo neck jumper and black, that was like a balaclava, and he was the Black Angel. He was challenging the public for, wrestling, and the same you had the fellas in the stand. But I'd known the boxing side, so I knew how it worked. But you had to get inside the inner circle to be worked. So I had to come in the old way, the GR, like the man from the public. And they left me go on it because they didn't realize that, that I was a wrestler. And I kind of hid that from them. So anyway, I took the Black Angel apart, and I kept throwing him down and putting him on his back. And was quite fit and strong at that time. And he kept coming at me with every kind of a dirty thing you could think about. Head straight in, bang, to getting like two puckos, to getting bang with the heads, and to getting a bit nasty. So I took him into the floor and put a crucifix on it, and finished it in the second round. And after that, then the man, Mel Reid, said, "Well, I've got work for you," he said, "if you want it," he said. But as a wrestler, to take the fellas that would come from the crowd to protect the showman, if you like. And the word they use for that is, "You're the shooter," but not the shooter as in bang bang, the gangster with the gun. Shooter meant troubleshooter. So trouble to the showman was when a brown belt judo player or a black belt judo player would come out of the crowd and challenge. But he would beat hell out of any showman, because showmen knew very little of anything about wrestling. They were pure showmen. They could put on a great performance, but they couldn't wrestle. You put a heavy hand on them, and they were, they couldn't cope. So that was my job. When a fellow challenged the people on the stand, then the man on the stand, which in this case was Mel Reid, there was also another man, Ron Tail, had another booth, but we used to work between them, depending which one they'd be on. But he'd get me around. He'd say, "I can't give you this showman. He's busy." He wouldn't say showman. He'd call him whatever he'd be, Mad Monk or whatever nickname, whatever he'd be wrestling under. But he said, "I have a young Irish man here." He said, he'll wrestle him. So anyway, I would take out the fella that would be the challenger fairly easy, because I would take him in and I'd get a submission on him. Mostly an arm lock or something like that. I'd just take him straight into the floor. And to be a mixture of judo and wrestling, amateur wrestling, which I perfected at that time, both arts. So that suited him. So and later then in time, when I was in Ealing Broadway, there was another wrestling show there, and I remember when my kids were young, they were about 10 and about 5, they'd come along as well to the show, and they'd come around to me every now and then, and I'd give them a bunch of half-crowns and 2 shilling pieces, because that's the way it worked at that time. And at that time now, I was established in both wrestling and the boxing side. So sometimes I'd box, sometimes I'd wrestle, but I could have wrestled and boxed as many as about maybe 100 rounds in a weekend, a bank holiday weekend, because I'd be in and out of the ring all the time and full-time working. And I had established myself as a boots fighter at that time, prize fighter if you like. But of course, the boxers and the wrestlers, none of us that was serious. The only serious about another 5 or 6 years, I went to Dale Martin Promoters in Brixton. Dale Martin Promoters in Brixton. They put on all the top wrestlers in Britain at that time. You're talking about Mick McManus, Jackie Pallow, Steve Vidal, all Adrian Street, all the fellas that were on television every Saturday and every Wednesday night. People used to, Irishmen on the building trade even would go home and very early to make sure that they were there at home to watch it on a Saturday, because it was always Saturday afternoon to be wrestling, and you'd get like some Mick McManus. So I got to know all these people and get to wrestle with them, and you know, that was I was into like the top promoter of the South of England. And then later, another 5 years further on, Buddy Zucker started wrestling in the Wellington Shepherd's Bush, which I was working for Buddy at that time. Buddy's minder at that time. I was working in the same club. So every promoter that came in, I was getting to wrestle with their wrestlers. So Brian Dixon came in. He was a top northern promoter. He was the man, Shirley Crabtree, which was known as Big Daddy. And another man was Luke McMasterson. I knew them by their real names. People would have known him as Giant Haystack. So I got to wrestle with all these guys. And that was a bit of fun and money. I could get my few bob, and that was fantastic. I also had a good amateur career, but I was always careful not to mixing the two. So what I was doing, some of the fairground work, I was working in mask, and I was the Tipperary Tiger, so I wore a mask, and my wrestling name was the Tipperary Tiger. But wrestling covers such a huge ground, because you have 3 Olympic sports that are all wrestling. You've got Greco-Roman, you've got freestyle, which is the wrestling, which is the farthest target, which is the one I done, which is from the top of your head to the soles of your feet. It's all a target. But Greco-Roman is pretty much like boxer. It's all top half. And that's the 2 main wrestlings. And then you'd have judo, which I would say is just another form of wrestling. So you have 3 main ones. And then even in the island of Britain, you've got Cornish, you've got Cumberland, Westmoreland, you've got Highland, you've got all these different forms of wrestling. And in Ireland, years ago and going right back, you had collar and elbow wrestling. And the old prize fighters, years ago, before you got the Queensberry rules, a cross buttock was allowed in boxing at that time. Whereas I'd say that it's the oldest combat sport in the world, I'd say. It's wrestling, because it predates the Roman Empire even. It goes right back to the ancient Greeks and the first Olympia. There was wrestlers in it long before boxing was established. But it's like I said, I would love to have a long talk about wrestling, because my career was 25 years. That's quite, a lot. So I'll be back now again in my gym later. Okay. Hi, we're back again, and we're now in my gym in Ryan. And I always had a gym all my life nearly since I was wrestling. But I'll show you some of the pictures we have here in the gym. This is of my judo days, and I held 4 titles, London titles, and this is my main hold down there. Kemo, Shiho, Gitami. That's a bit of Japanese now. And here we have David and Dave Starbrook. He was a silver medal in the Olympics. And come around again. Here. Now we've got some wrestlers here. This is the Foresters Wrestling Club. This was Dave Parkinson, the instructor. This was myself. This is the famous Mick Murphy, the cyclist. In 1958, he won the Ross Thornton. I have him down here as a wrestler. Go back a minute. There he is as a wrestler, and that was around mid-70s. And here we have Steve Casey here, the famous man that had a song about him. He's a Kerry man, a bit before my time, but I like to have on. Now, this is the man that was in our wrestling club. Ken Richmond. Ken was the last man anybody of my age group will remember when you went to the picture house, there was a man striking a gong. And that man, I knew him for about 10 years. And he was King Richmond. He was the last man to strike the gong. There was 4 different ones. Now, to this one here now, this is Buddy Sucro, and this is something some of you might have seen when Buddy came to Ireland. That's where the picture came from. A lot of that was filmed here in this gymnasium. And that picture was my one, and that's Buddy Sucro, the man I'd worked for. And I don't have to explain who he is. Everybody knows him. Now, here we are again, the Foresters Wrestling Club. Jimmy Carroll from Effing in Limerick. Ali, he was a Iranian. He was a world champion wrestler. And the Iranians were some of the best wrestlers in the world for the lightweights. The heavyweights, then you have the Russians dominate all the heavies. Now here we have Dr. Pat O'Callaghan, a very old photograph of 1928 with the big hammer. He threw the hammer. The Iron Man, the Clonmel Iron Man, here he is there, but they call from Dungarvan, Iron Man from Dungarvan. But he was the man called the Clonmel Iron Man. Peter, this way. Peter Crotty. Now, here we have here. This is Dan O'Mahony, the famous Dano. I unveiled this man's bronze statue to him. I was one of 3 different people. Bishop Buckley, the famous road bowler, and myself were the 3 main people called in to unveil that statue to the famous man himself. He was in 1937, again before my time. He travelled Ireland with Steve Casey. They wrestled in various different shows all over Ireland. They actually wrestled in Duffy Circus tents. They had one in the Lee Fields, and they had another famous show in Mallow. A lot of people still talk about. Now we have photos. It's all Muhammad Ali here. I've got Muhammad Ali all over the place. I have the famous Thriller in Manila here. Thriller in Manila. I have all the famous old boxers and wrestlers. Here we have a man I mentioned, the Mick McManus. He died there aged 93. He was one of the top stars in Dale Mountains, and I knew that man. And Pat Roach, There's a lot of them there. Every one of them I got good name. But oh yeah, down here now is some of my own wrestling at the time. You can see typical wrestling. Wrestling is all about closing down space. When you're wrestling, so you're right tight in closing down space. It's not like boxing. Boxing is about making space. And anybody who'd watched McGregor, what do they call it now? They call it cage fighting, and that's a mixture of the two arts, mixture of boxing, wrestling, and judo. And an awful lot of that, as you'll see, is all about closed down space. And it's not as exciting as a lot of people who, like boxing. There's no space, so it's closed down. But the likes of McGregor can make it good. He's a lightweight, and he can make it, the action is a bit better. If you're heavier fellas, now, these are some of the trophies over the years. Now this one here is the Dan O'Mahony Memorial Trophy. That was presented to me in Ballydehob about 12 years ago now, and I done my Guinness World Records and stuff like that there. This is one of them. That was for Bristol Open Championship, and this one here was for London's, and that's the very first one I ever got, and it's 1972. And this is for the police in Hindon, in London. I wrestled there and I got the shield. It's Alan Wishart Memorial Shield. That's quite like I said, I got so many trophies that I couldn't. There's a few more over here. I still walk out here every morning. I do my sets. I do 35 minutes on that step, and I do so many sit-ups there. I do 100 sit-ups, and then I do feet out. I do flat exercises, and I'm keeping quite fit for a fellow that's on his 70th year. So. Thank you for having the patience for listening to my video. Okay, bye.